Representative Lieu.
Thank you, Chairman Meeks, for holding this important hearing on democracy. I'd like to start off with democracy at home. I note that the former president lost a popular election by over 7 million votes, and he lost multiple electoral states. Yet many Republicans continue to push the big lie that somehow the election was stolen. And that's what in part led to January 6th attack on our Capitol, where 140 law enforcement officers were brutalized. I also note that this big lie is continuing. And even though it's been more than a year since the presidential election, Republicans still cannot explain who stole the election, nor how it was done. And that's because the election was not stolen. The former president simply lost. However, we continue to see this big lie animating possible future political violence. There are some bright spots. Then Republican Attorney General Bill Barr did tell the former president to his face that the election conspiracy claims were, quote, bullshit. We also have current Senator Mike Rounds, who recently came out and said, basically, Biden won, the election was fair, and he urged other Republicans to start saying the same thing. So my question for the witnesses is, how important do you think it is that Republicans start telling the truth and say one simple statement that the election was not stolen for purposes of bolstering democracy?
Well, so I thank you very much for that question. I mean, I was very concerned back in November and December of 20 about what Mr. Trump was doing, and that's when I started talking about the big lie. I mean, the big lie, a lie this big has the consequence that it creates an alternative reality for people to live in, and that alternative reality includes media safe spaces in the right, and it can create, as you've suggested, a kind of filter for who really belongs to a political party and who really doesn't belong to a political party. It also has the consequence that truth becomes not what you and I can find out, but truth becomes whatever comes out of the mouth of the person who's at the center of the cult of personality. All those things are irreconcilable with democracy, as is fundamentally something which sometimes goes unnoticed, which is the issue of victimhood. What the big lie does is that it takes someone who is very powerful, and it was in fact the president of the United States, and turns him into a victim. It takes someone who actually tried to overcome an election and turns him into a victim. And then because once the big lie makes you a victim, it then authorizes you to do whatever you want. It authorizes you not to play by the rules. And I mention this because it's a historical point. This is a tactic which precisely, I mean, I hate to reach for these examples too readily, but this is a tactic which precisely was used by the Nazis. The idea that we are the victims. We are the ones who have been oppressed, and therefore we have the right to do whatever we want. So the big lie is extremely dangerous in the United States. I wished very much that in 2020 there would have been more Americans, especially more Republicans, who had simply accepted the basic reality much sooner, because we've let this thing get way out of hand. A political science point is that the big lie means that you have a political party who is concentrating on gaming the system as opposed to policy. And the problem with gaming the system is that you become addicted to gaming the system. The more you try to game the system, the less you're interested in your constituents, the less you're interested in policy. You get to the point where it's an addiction and you can do nothing else except game the system. And that leads to stagnation. It leads to resistance. I mean, if you get to a situation where you game the system too hard, people no longer believe in the system and they just say, oh, it's a game and we're not going to play anymore. And so I agree very much with the premise of your question, Representative Lieu. It's absolutely essential, and the sooner the better that we get back to common sense on this issue, and then compete over policy differences rather than competing by trying to warp the system.
Thank you.
I'm happy to echo those sentiments, and also to add, one further reflection, which is that really most autocrats have come to power on the back of well-organized lies that are designed to create distrust. What is the function of the big lie, of the lie that the 2020 election was stolen? It creates among a part of the population a conviction that everything they believed in is wrong, that every political institution is false or is is lying. You know, Congress is lying to you, the FBI, the CIA, you know, the police, the people who count the votes, everybody's lying. And this creates a sense of profound distrust on a part of the population. And it's that distrust, it's that group of people who feel alienated from the country and alienated from its politics, who then see no other recourse, they see no other ability to influence events except through violence. And that is that's a phenomenon that we have seen repeated before. I could cite to you multiple autocracies where that cycle has completed itself. And one of the reasons, I'm so worried about it happening in the United States is because I recognize it, as I said from other times and places, not just Germany of the 1930s, but many others. And this, of course, is why it's so important that people who do have influence in that part of the population, whether it's political leaders, whether it's members of Congress, whether it's business people, whether it's religious leaders, that they begin to work with that part of the population in order to bring them back into the mainstream political system, to convince them that democracy works. And I hope that some people, listening to this call, reflect on that and try to end this deep division in our society.
Thank you, and I yield back.